I said. "Why do we need a DNA test?" And stormed out of the living room, slamming the door so hard the whole house shook. The picture frames on the wall rattled like they were holding on to the last piece of our fragile life together. That night, I thought I had won. I thought I had him. But now, sitting in the driver's seat of my car, me new home, holding my 3-month-old baby in my arms and counting change for diapers, I can't help but laugh at how wrong I was. I'm Emily. I'm 28, and I've lost everything. My marriage, my friends, my dignity all gone. All because I couldn't face one simple truth. It all started with Mark. I met him at a mutual friend's birthday party. He wasn't my type-a-knot at first. He was more polished, well-spoken, and had this quiet confidence that instantly put me off. I usually went for the bad boys guys who knew how to break a heart, not guys who could fix things. But there was something about him. His job as a tech consultant was stable. He had a plan. He had his life together in a way I never had. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but Mark didn't just see me as another girl. He looked at me like I was the one he'd been waiting for. We hit it off after a few weeks of casual dates, and before I knew it, I was falling for him. His sweet gestures opening doors, helping me with my coat, making me laugh like I'd never laughed before were too much to ignore. 6 months later, he proposed. I said yes without thinking. The wedding was perfect, his family was perfect, and I played the role of the perfect wife. But behind closed doors, I was far from perfect. I kept seeing the other guys I had been seeing before Mark. Brad from the office, Greg from the gym, and occasionally Jason when he was in town for work. My friends Mel and Liz knew everything. They didn't judge, they just covered for me. They thought I was playing the game well. They even laughed, saying I was living life on expert mode. I kept the lie going, even as I began to notice things changing. Mark and I had been trying for a baby for a while. When I missed my period, I panicked. I hadn't been careful, and the men I had been with weren't careful either. I realized it could be any of them. But what was I supposed to do? Tell Mark there was a chance it wasn't his? No way. So I faked excitement when the home test came back positive. I watched his face light up as he spun me around in the kitchen, and for a moment, I actually convinced myself it was his. But then, Mark casually mentioned a prenatal DNA test one evening. "Just to be safe," he said, looking up from his plate like he was asking for more bread. The words hit me like a punch. "Why do we need a DNA test?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Are you accusing me of something?" He just stared at me, confused, not suspicious, and that made me defensive. I stormed off, telling him he didn't trust me, even though I knew deep down it wasn't about trust. It was about the truth I couldn't face. The next few weeks were tense. Mark became quieter, more distant. He worked late, took calls in another room, and sometimes looked at me like I was a stranger. I convinced myself it was just baby jitters, just nerves before the baby came. But I knew he wasn't the only one whose world was falling apart. I cut things off with Brad and Jason, but Greg was a different story. I couldn't quit him. There was something about his charm, the way he never asked questions about my life. He didn't care about my lies. He only cared about me. So, I kept seeing him, hoping I could keep this double life together. But things weren't that simple anymore. One night at a dinner with friends, someone brought up how common prenatal DNA tests were becoming. "It's just standard medical practice now," a friend's wife said, not realizing she had stepped into a minefield. Mark stared at his plate, and I launched into a defensive speech about trust and loyalty. But across the table, Liz was staring at me. I could see the doubt in her eyes, and it only made me feel worse. Later, she asked why I was so defensive if I had nothing to hide. The question hit me harder than it should have. Why was I so defensive? That night, Mark tried to bring it up again. "It's not about trust," he said quietly. "It's about being thorough with medical information." But I wouldn't listen. I shut him down, accusing him of listening to everyone else but trusting me. He slept on the couch that night, and I thought I'd won. But how was I supposed to know he was already putting the pieces together? 2 months later, I was 7 months pregnant, and I was sitting on the edge of my bed, scrolling through Mark's phone while he was in the shower. It was a classic move, I know. A woman with trust issues checking up on her husband. But I wasn't expecting to find anything. He was the faithful one, right? But then I saw texts from a woman named Jenna. The messages were about the situation and asking if he had made a decision yet. My heart sank. Who was Jenna? When Mark came out of the shower, I confronted him. Who is Jenna? I demanded, waving his phone in front of him. Mark didn't flinch. Instead, he just wrapped a towel around his waist and sat down on the bed. His eyes were empty, like he was already done with me. Jenna is my lawyer, he said quietly, and we need to talk. I didn't know what to say next. He pulled out his phone and showed me everything texts between me and Brad, me and Greg. Conversations with Mel and Liz where I joked about not knowing who the father was. He had it all. Someone had sent it to him anonymously. I wanted to lie. I wanted to deny it, to say it was a mistake, but I couldn't. The truth was out. He knew everything. I was caught, and the shame burned. I want a paternity test, Mark said calmly. Not after the baby is born. I want it now. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say no, that it wasn't necessary. But deep down, I knew. I knew he was right. He had every reason to ask for it. I was the one who had betrayed him, who had destroyed everything. The test was scheduled for the following week. I tried to keep my cool, but deep down I already knew the truth. The test would show what I had been trying to hide for so long. The next few days were filled with silence. Mark stayed in the guest room, barely speaking to me. I tried to make things right, cooking his favorite meals, wearing the lingerie he liked, even begging for another chance. Nothing worked. The test results came back 5 days later. I'll never forget that moment, Mark reading the results with a blank expression, his shoulders sagging with the weight of everything we had lost. The results were clear. The baby wasn't his. I had destroyed my marriage, my family, my life, all because I couldn't face one simple truth. I never imagined how much I would lose. My father refused to look at me. My friends turned their backs on me. Mark walked away. He left with nothing but a lawyer's business card and the sound of my heart breaking. And now, I'm sitting here in my car, holding my baby, counting my last few quarters for diapers. I can't help but think if only I had taken the test when he first asked. If only I had been honest from the beginning. Would it have made a difference? Would I have saved my family? I don't know, but I do know this. I can't go back. I can't fix what I broke. All I can do now is figure out how to rebuild my life, for myself, for my baby, and for whatever future I can still have.